Welcome to the Backyard Professor Chess videos. I promised you a good game this time, and I've got it. This is Alexander Alekin. He is playing the world's women's chess champion, Miss Vera Menchik, in this game. She plays white. He plays the black pieces. And he really does an interesting thing here. He does a lot of interesting things here. He's going to play the Queen's Indian defense, and his opponent is very adept at this particular opening, but he says it's a tame opening at this point, which it actually is. There's nothing really overly dramatic going on. He's going to fee and kether his bishop at this point, and she is doing typical developing moves, and so he's going to go check instantly. She brings out her bishop rather than the knight up or the knight over or the knight over, or moving the king, of course. You're not going to move the king, duh. So he goes ahead and takes the bishop. Normally when they put the bishop in there to block that kind of a check of the bishop diagonal on bishop knight 5, they'll take it. That's usually what happens. And she didn't take with the queen. She took with the queen knight. And now he keeps a small but compact center. He keeps everything under control, supposedly. Let's keep watching how she plays and see if she can catch Alekin unawares on some things. Queen comes to bishop 2. The problem, he says here at this point, is this knight is not very happy there. It is not the right place for the knight, and he will show why here just shortly. She brings the rook to queen 1. He will castle on the king side. Alekin castled quite a few of his games on the queen side, which enabled him to stick that rook in just one move on the file when it suited his purpose. This time, though, he does castle king side, and now she brings the knight to king 4. And he said, this is fine by me. It's not going to hurt my position at all. This move, he said, is a good move because he wants to avoid swapping the queen bishop at this point. He wants to keep his queen bishop on that diagonal, and so he's not going to let her manipulate the position in order to exchange that. And she's going to try to double her rooks on the queen file, and that's when he takes the knight. Now that was the knight that was not well placed there, and it has served its purpose at this point. And like he says, he does not want to swap the bishops, so he bumps the pawn to maintain his bishop. It doesn't fight for the center, but it preserves the potential to fight for the center later on. It's more of a safe move at this point. And now she's going to try to get something going here. He's thinking here with this that she was wanting to provoke him to push the pawn at that point to get the queen side going. And if he would have done that, the advantage would have been hers, because then she would have just bumped her queen back, and now she gets the open bishop file. So he did not fall for that. He said instead he went king rook to bishop 1. Instead of provoking the pawn move to open up the file first so that white could control it, he simply puts his rook on that file. That's kind of interesting. It's not an open file yet either, but he's showing he's not gonna do it the way she wants. The pawns here are lined up really good to contest the center, and her center is by no means weak. So this will be real interesting to see how they manipulate things. She's bringing her queen back, or bishop, her queen bishop, her king bishop back, and now he will push. Notice he waited until she bumped her bishop back, her light squared bishop, before he pushed that bishop pawn. He wants to keep his queen bishop because that long diagonal going toward her king is very valuable to Alekin, right? So now she comes back to queen, queen, one. So she got nothing going the way she was hoping on the queen's side yet, and yet it's hard for her at this point to find any suitable square for her pieces, is what he is saying. Because of that, he said, I was able to obtain a serious initiative. And here's how he did this. She took the pawn, and his knight pawn took the pawn, and that was the right way to recapture, he said. He's not worried about his backward queen pawn because he's going to be able to protect it really well in this kind of a position. She really doesn't have a lot of pressure or fighting against his backward queen pawn anyway in that center, so he's not worried about it at this point. She bumps to queen, king, 2, and now he's going to, knight to rook 4, not to h4, to rook 4. And now she gets the rooks doubled on the queen file. Of course, the target's going to be this pawn. So let's see if that is enough pressure to make him change his mind, and he says nothing doing. What he wants to do now is, because she is going to pressure through the center against one of his weaknesses, what he wants to do is bump the king bishop pawn and the king pawn. He wants to start pushing these up. Yeah? This makes sense. The way his position is set up with that being kettled bishop pointing toward that king side, it makes sense that he wants to use his pawns as the way to force through, backed by the pieces and of course the rooks and the knight and the queen. So he's going to do a kingside attack is what he's preparing to do, because the way she's set up, if she can get something going, she could probably have a stronger queenside / center attack. But notice she hasn't got a lot going yet. Yeah, she's more or less, her pieces have not cooperated or coordinated the way she's played them. So she is huddled in the center, but it's not a strong attack center, is what he's trying to say. And she is the first to push the king 4, so you can see that she's going to try to shoot for the center / queenside, although there's not a lot of queenside activity right now. And he is going to come into it. Nice fork on the queen and bishop. He said, let's get this going right now. Queen comes to king 3, and now, rather than backing off, he pushes the king pawn. Now he's got a really strong knight on the king side. No, it's not a permanent knight yet. It can be chased away, but it's a very powerful, strong placed knight where tactics can begin to come into play hard. She maintains her bishop at this point, and now he brings the queen rook to queen 1. He's got his backward pawn. Notice he's brought the knight up. So the weakness is this pawn, and she is stacked against that weakness. However, it's well guarded. Like he was saying, he has also maintained potential pressure down the diagonal and a possibility of kingside expansion through the pawns. So this will be interesting to see what happens because of his last move of the queen rook to queen 1. It allowed her to start a queenside counterattack. And he mentions that. He said that's an interesting pawn sacrifice, but does anything come of it? She wants to start getting going. Bishop comes down to rook 1. Get out of the way of that bishop because she's coming on the queen side. Or get the bishop out of the way because she's going to start opening up stuff and coming down the queen side through those files, hopefully, is what her hope is. Pawn take pawn, and now the knight takes the pawn. Notice how his knight is so nimble. He was over here, putting great pressure on the king side. Now he's come back over to here, hopefully keeping the queen side under wraps. Right? That's his idea. He doesn't want to let her mow him over on the queen side because, quite frankly, his king side is not very well started. Right? I mean, you can see he hasn't got a whole lot going right now. So she seems, at this point, to be beating him to the punch, and now she's going to try to start throwing material over that way, and he realizes, okay, she's going that way, rather than putting his materials into defense on the queen side, he's going to go ahead and press for the king side. And it's a race. Who gets to attack first? This is the proper way to do chess. Jeremy Silman is huge on this stuff. He says, man, if you start an attack, no matter what, at all possibility, ignore the threats of your opponent and just go through with your attack. No matter what. Don't be willy-nilly with it. So it looks like we're going to get a queen side and a king side here. This will be very interesting to see what happens. Well, the pawn will take the pawn. Yes. Notice how this is affecting, and the pawn will take the pawn. And he says the point of him pushing his bishop pawn was to open up the G file for him. Now he's got a wide open kingside attack. And you say, wait a minute, doesn't that G file expose his king? It does. But she has given all indication that she's going to go to the queen side, so he's chosen the king side. And it's real interesting to watch how he prepares this. Now she's going to push the pawn to bishop 3, and then queen, king, knight 2. Just, straight, forward, simple, crisp, clear, go after the king. It seems, even though she does have the open file on the queen side, she certainly has a potential to exchange a knight and open a partial file hitting a weakness, although it is covered. But it just doesn't seem like her queen side is as strong as his king side by his strategy of opening up the G file. Isn't that interesting? You say, well, the queen's in front of the king. Yeah, but it's not in danger. There's no rook there that's going to pin the queen to the king, so this is an attack on his part, not a defense. It's real interesting how he's doing this. And what he's threatening is pawn to bishop 5. That's what you've got to watch out for. So, the queen knight, the queen rook comes to the file. So she's going to try to say, I have more oomph than you do. The shtick is he's against the king, and she has no passed pawn that's going to be very dangerous on the queen side. Right? She doesn't have any real open targets to attack technically on the queen side. So she might have messed up here. We shall see. King Rook 1, of course. Get the king out of the way. Knight comes to knight 3. Okay, here we go. Now she's going to try to get the score going on the queen side, and instead of exchanging, that would help her on the queen side. So instead of exchanging the knight, he keeps an attacking piece and brings it back toward the king side. Because he's going to go king side, she's going to go queen side. Yeah? Very interesting strategy. And then the rook comes back over to queen 2. You've got to hit that weakness again. And now the knight keeps right on going. Knight, knight 4. So there's no question now. Alekhine is ahead in the attack. You can see that with the way he's put his... and she sees that too. She says, okay, king's got to go to rook 1, absolutely. And then rook to king knight 1. And now she's in trouble. Already with just a couple of swift, quick moves. Notice, interestingly, she still can't get anything going on the queen side. But his position has strengthened for the king side. That's real interesting how that works. Rook to king, bishop 2, of course, the only way to save that pawn. The knight was going to take the pawn, of course, because you can't open it up because the queen will go here and go mate. Right? Or even here. Well, no, here. That's the bishop. That's not a rook. The rook's here. So you've got to be real careful here. So the rook has to come over. So again, there's another piece of hers that was going to help on the queen side in an offense that now has to come over and do a defensive chore. Right? Simply because his attack has everything. And he's got the bishop coming through here. So this is getting tough for her. The queen rook now goes to king 1. It's done its job. Now see, he's fully developed. That's true. But here, yes, he's defending his weakness, but now his weakness is not being attacked. That rook can be much more valuable behind the 2 pawns that he's going to press forward. And in this particular kingside attack, you've got your pieces. So push with the pawns. Use the pawns to break through and create the weaknesses. That makes perfect sense, and that's what he does. It's very cool how he does this. Now she went rook to queen 1 again, and this time, rather than bumping down, he does the rook lift, which is excellent. It is at the same time a good defensive move, yet a very good offensive move. You can see some sacrifices, knights, rooks, bishops, whatever, are going to start occurring on her king side to break that open. Or even to here. Either one of those is really a dandy rook move. Yeah, once you get that rook lift in, at the same time defending his only weakness in his position, that she can attack. So this is really getting tough for her. Her pressure, her queen side has withered, and now she's trickling over here. The problem is she's not set up for the best defense on the king side, while his offensive is exquisite. So, here we go. And this is pure desperation. He says this won't help her at all. Pawn take pawn, of course. Queen will come to queen 4. Swap the queens. Now, when you do a king side attack, the idea, really, I mean, you can king side attack with a constellation of various pieces, but really the queen is the bulwark. The queen is the anchor. So if you're doing a defense against a kingside attack, it would make sense for you to swap queens, because that takes out an enormous size stone that's going to be thrown at you, right? Or else an enormous size support for 2, maybe even 3 extra pieces. So her queen move, volunteering to swap the queens, would help her, but it's not forced for Alekin. He does not want to swap the queens, and he does not have to. Again, I think he's got all the aces in his hand here. I think he's really got it to where he's gonna take charge, and he just simply takes that pawn. He said, that's not a problem. I'll take the pawn. And then the knight takes the pawn. So, yeah, she kind of clears out a little more on the queen side and a little bit more in the center, but it's way too late. Pawn take pawn, knight take pawn, and now knight rook 6. Kablam, here we go. The knight, of course, cannot be taken, and yet it seals off the escape of the king. It's a rough position if you're black. That's not fun. Rook will go to knight 2, and pawn to bishop 6. More pressure against that g2 pawn. And she can't take the knight yet still, simply because queen to g1 mate. Queen to g1, and then the queen will take, and then the rook will take to mate the king. So it'll be a queen sacrifice if that pawn takes that knight. Oh, no, it won't, because the pawn will take the knight. No. So the pawn will come up, and then, well, the pawn can't take, well, anyway, I'll show you what she can't take the knight, but she can move the pawn up to block the queen, and it's at this point that the longest check in chess history occurred. He simply pushed the pawn and did a long discovered check on the king from that bishop that he parked down there lots of moves ago, and it's just been sitting there sleeping. But it's the most powerful piece right now. That's crazy, because it's on one of the worst squares it can be on, and yet there it is, the most powerful piece on the board. And it's here that that she resigned as well. So, I mean, the trick with putting the bishop here is it pins the bishop for one thing, because now you've got the rook down. Check. And that's curtains. As far as that goes, that's curtains. So there is your wonderful longest check in chess history right there. So, and it was against the women's world champion at the time. So he played a fabulous game. So it's always fun to play through a lot of these Grandmaster games when they have such interesting tactics and strategies like this one. So, in the meantime, remember, thanks for watching my videos. Be good, do well, have fun, be happy, stay calm. I said do good, didn't I? Well, be good, too, as far as that goes. And I will see you in the next Backyard Professor Chess video.